So I'm going to be showing you how to do a blade replacement from the main menu. When your machine is ready to start, you'll go ahead to the manual menu. You then need to turn manual mode on. Underneath the saw, you can see there's a blade change. You go ahead and press blade change. The machine will move your saws into the 0 degree position. Once everything is in its position, you can go ahead and power off here at the control circuit. When your machine has been powered off, you can now come to the FRL and dump the air. When your air is dumped, you will go ahead, insert your lock into the appropriate hole and pull the key. Now your air is locked out and tagged out. Now I will show you how to lock out and tag out the panel. When the control panel circuit and the FRL have both been disengaged, you can come to the main panel and turn it into the off position. You'll put your finger on the back to push out the tab for lockout tag out. You then insert your lock and lock it. And now you are ready to perform maintenance on your machine. All right, so the first thing you want to do is remove this zip tie here. This will need to be done every time you do a blade change. So every 600 cycles, you're going to want to inspect the teeth of your blade, make sure that there are no cracks, wearing, or obvious signs of dulling on the teeth. If you start to see that your cuts are getting less and less in quality, the first thing you're going to want to do is to make sure that you inspect your blade and see if it's ready for a blade change. Once the zip tie is removed, you can go ahead and use a 1/2 inch wrench or impact and remove the cylinder for the hold down. This will need to be out of the way to make sure that you can get that blade off. Once it's removed, you can just let it hang over the front. You will then need the 10mm Allen wrench and the long open end wrench that you've been provided with. You will use the 10mm wrench to hold the shaft steady, and with the open end wrench you will go ahead and pry that off. Now that your nut is loose, you can go ahead and pull this all the way off. And the plate that holds the saw will be removed. And then you can slide the blade off just like that. And this is when you will install your new blade. Once the new blade is installed, go ahead, put the plate back. Get that nut on there. And snug up that nut so it's just tight enough and you don't want to over torque that. And that is how you change a blade on the 979-2. When you've successfully changed your blade, you can go ahead and remount the hold down cylinder. Once your cylinder is remounted, you want to make sure to not forget to reapply the zip tie to keep the air lines out of the way of the saw during production. Also, make sure that once you have the zip tie put in place, you want to go ahead and trim any remaining zip tie left after the clamp to make sure that you are still not getting any interference with production. Now I'm going to be showing you how to do a chip out block change. Here from the main menu, you're going to want to go to the manual screen and turn on manual mode. Underneath the saw category, you will then press the chip out change button. The saws will move into the 45 degree position and the lockout tag out pins will engage. And from there you are ready to power off, dump air, lockout tag out, and begin your chip out change. So when a lockout tag out has been performed on your machine, you can go ahead and remove the clear panel in front of the feed assembly to get access to the chip out block. You will need an 1/8 inch Allen wrench to go ahead and loosen the 2 set screws here. Once these set screws have been loosened, if you're having trouble removing the Delrin chip out block, a little trick is using a piece of tape to go ahead and stick to the top surface and shimmy it out of the block. When the chip out block has been removed, you can go ahead and put the chip out block, the new chip out block, back into the chip out assembly. And you want to make sure you don't forget to tighten these screws, tighten the set screws here, not too tight, but just tight enough to keep it secure so when the saw engages, it doesn't pull the chip out block out of its assembly. Okay, so to change your 45 and 0 degree cut locations, the first thing you want to do is go into the manual, turn manual mode on, and engage either the blade change or the chip out change modes to be ready for a lockout tagout. Once your blades are in the lockout tagout state, you can go ahead and power off and turn off your air. And now you will be ready to go ahead and change your 45 and 0 degree stops. So here are the stops where you will be changing the 0 degree cut position, and on the right side here we have the 45 degree cut position stop. Now, in order to make a change, you want to go ahead and get a 1/2 inch open end wrench, and you want to loosen the jam nut on this bolt here. When you thread this bolt out, it will make sure the saw comes in towards the operator. If you took the saw or took the bolt and threaded it in, it would make sure that the blade went towards the back side of the machine more. So if your cut is less than your 0 degree, you want to make sure that you thread this in, and if it is greater than your 0 degree cut, you want to thread it out. So the first thing you're going to want to do is loosen this jam nut on the bolt. You will thread the bolt out to get a smaller than 45 degree cut. You will thread the bolt in to get a larger than 45 degree cut. So these are the vertical bearings for the saw. You have 4 on each head. 2 will be accessible from the top. The other 2 will be accessible from underneath. And these are recommended to be greased every 250 hours and every time you decide to change the blade. It is the easiest position with the blade off to access the lowermost bearings. So whether 250 hours or a blade change comes, that is the recommended greasing schedule. And the uppermost, you will have one on the top of the bearing and on the front side of that plate. So every 300 cycles, you're going to want to remove the guards and blow out any debris from any of the spaces inside the feed assembly and the head of the saw. So you want to go ahead and make sure that you've blown off any debris that could have gotten stuck on the grease fittings before you do any greasing as well. So these 4 bolts on either corner are the locations of the bearings for the feed assembly shafts. Once you have the guards removed, you can go ahead and you have 2 Zerk fittings accessible from the top, and you will have 2 Zerk fittings accessible from the bottom, and those need to be greased every 250 hours of production. So there are 2 bearings on the servo pulley assembly that need to be greased every 250 hours as well. The back position here, we have a 45 degree Zerk fitting that comes right out in front of this bolt head here. If you go ahead and stick your finger back along the cylindrical standoff, you will be able to run into the top of that Zerk fitting there. So the ball screw nut underneath the movable head has 1 grease fitting that also needs to be lubricated every 250 hours underneath the ball screw assembly. There are 2 bearings attached to the ball screw shaft underneath the fixed head that also need to be greased every 250 hours. So the ball screw nut underneath the movable head, grease fittings here, this needs to be greased every 80 hours of production. There are 4 bearings underneath the movable head that are on the linear bearing shafts. Those need to be greased every 250 hours. And here are the 2 linear bearings for the movable head closest to the outfeed side that need to be greased every 250 hours as well.